Okay, welcome to Real Turkey channel. This is Atilla Yeşilada. Our official live broadcast will start in exactly 2 minutes, but I always arrive early to make sure I'm at the right channel. Yes, I'm at the right channel, and there is an audience, so I must have clicked all the right buttons. And today we're talking about Turkey's economy, in particular April data, which was unsurprisingly very bad, of course. But I want to be more forward looking in this broadcast and explain to you why I think that Turkey is not going to experience a brief recession, but a rather prolonged, very deep recession. This is what I from the papers, foreign policy website. There is an article about how Corona affects major developing nations like Indonesia, India, Turkey, I'm sorry, and Russia. Uh, I think you will see some of my views are confirmed there. Okay, it's 3 p.m. We're starting. Dear YouTubers, welcome to Real Turkey channel. I know you are getting sick of my face. I am getting sick of my face. But this is Atilla Yeşilada, your loving, caring, tender presenter. An announcement, our President Erdogan has officially given the start to relaxing corona-related restrictions. As of 11th of May, shopping malls and more importantly, barbers and ladies' hairdressers will be open under certain conditions. And I hope I shall soon be able to go out or bring in guests and broadcast in a professional manner. Now, today I want to talk about Turkish economy. Obviously, all of the economies that have been attacked by the coronavirus will suffer a recession. In developed nations, for example, this recession is going to be deep, but not last long, probably 2 quarters, 3 quarters at most. In some of the developing nations, the coronavirus epidemic may lead to disaster. And I'm afraid Turkey may become one of those. The April data gave us the first hints of cracks in the economic fundament. I'm not going to spend too much time on data analysis because obviously most of Turkey and businesses were under lockdown in April, so bad data is not surprising. But there are some forward-looking indicators there which suggests that we may have a prolonged recession, a very deep recession. Then I'm going to cite 4 reasons as to why Turkey will not recover easily, probably at least a year, year and a half from the outbreak. Now, starting with the data briefly, Turkey's manufacturing PMI down by, I don't know, 20 percentage points. Understandable, most of the factories were closed. Turkey's composite PMI, which also includes services, down by 5 points, hovering at the historic lows since the data tracking has started. Once again, not surprising, in particular in services, most of the economy was shut down. The trade deficit is somehow disturbing. It is understandable that, by the way, trade deficit in April, according to preliminary figures, was roughly $4 billion a month. Now, it's understandable that our exports would go down because, EU was shut down. There were substantial restrictions on the movement of goods across the frontiers. Russia, unfortunately, is still experiencing daily rising cases. But imports have proved to be sticky. They declined as well, but much less in percentage terms than exports. Remember, Turkey has a huge trade deficit, part of which is compensated by tourism revenues. Now, this year, we're going to have a much smaller trade deficit, but it's probably not going to be compensated by tourism revenues. So the trade deficit figure of $4 billion a month may last for a couple of more months until either the tourism season takes start in autumn or EU recovers enough to suck up exports from Turkey, which means the Turkish currency is going to stay under pressure for a prolonged time. Bloomberg HT, which has nothing to do with the English language Bloomberg, but is a financial broadcaster, monthly publishes consumer confidence figures that was also down by 7 percentage points, and around it being neutral between consumers being optimistic and pessimistic. There's a sub-index there, the inclination to buy durable goods, including houses, that has declined below 50. I think it's somewhere around 40, which means that Turkish consumer is simply not feeling good enough to buy anything, even if she or he is allowed to go and shop. And that's the kind of forward-looking indicators that I find disturbing. There is also a retail sector confidence index published by an independent think tank called TEPAL in Ankara. And never mind the decline in the index, it found that 76% of those who participated in the survey have reported that their businesses have been somehow affected by the coronavirus. Now, remember, there's an organized retail, which is roughly 50%, and another 50%, which is just small shops. And for those small shops, which are poorly capitalized and the owners are not rich, essentially they work for a salary, these disruptions in business, if they continue for a few months, means Chapter 11, that's bankruptcy protection, and a substantial shrinkage of the small retail industry. We also look at political surveys when I prepare these broadcasts. According to Istanbul Economic Research, people are not happy with the amount of relief provided by the state. At least 1/3 thinks the state should do more for the unemployed and support small businesses. Another one called Avrasya, found that 63% of participants are unhappy with the state aid, in the sense that they are not getting enough. And that's one of the problems I'm going to be touching upon in the second portion of this survey. Now, as of 11th of May, Turkey will be going back to normal slowly. It will take about 3 months. And I want to ask the question of whether at the end of this 3 months, we can have a full recovery, or we can have a solid economy that's ready for full economic recovery when the rest of the world is ready. Obviously, if EU doesn't buy anything, if the corona epidemic gets worse in Russia, if there's further turbulence in financial markets, Turkish economy will go to the worst, but that's not our fault. I'm talking about endogenous factors which will prolong the recession. And I want to mention 4. The first is that we are going about relaxing corona restrictions in the wrong way. And the biggest mistake the administration is making is allowing some shops to open or lifting some travel restrictions without doing national corona testing. Now, Germany is far ahead of everyone in that. They test almost everyone. But also in other countries, this random testing shows that 20%, in some cases 40%, of corona patients are asymptomatic. That is, they show no symptoms. They may not even know that they're sick. And I would imagine there is a similar ratio of patients in Turkey, like typhoid Mary, walking around us, not knowing that they can infect others. This is why before these restrictions are relaxed, some countries are doing random testing to find out whether there are clusters of these asymptomatic infectees, and what the prevalence of the virus is in the general population. I mean, if you find out that 3%, 4% of the population carries the virus, you can accept the trade-off between potential losses of life and huge cost to the economy and open parts of the economy. But if 20% of the population is infected with many not showing symptoms, you probably should do, you should be a lot more patient and wait till these people recover, or put them under some kind of therapy. In my view, opening shopping malls, even in a very controlled manner, is a big mistake in this context, in the sense that there is really, I mean, if you have been to a shopping mall in Turkey, there are some huge, retail stores, but most of the stores are small, couple 20, 25 square meters. There is no way you're gonna maintain social distancing there. Two, at the end of May, uh, touristic resorts. I'm sorry, I am sorry. Sometimes I go too fast for my own good. Some hotels and tourist areas, facilities will be opened once they are certified as virus free. I talked to a couple of hotel owners or managers. They say there is no way you can, maintain social distancing. I mean, carrying a mask in 40 degrees Celsius sun, and wearing a swimsuit is just not the kind of thing that Turks do. So I'm extremely afraid that the epidemic will have a second wave in Turkey, which would not only have a huge economic cost, but it would also have a devastating psychological cost on people's consumption behavior. Because as the English proverb goes, once burned, twice shy. I mean, Turkey has already suffered a huge trauma, and now their government is telling them, look, everything is cool, just be careful, but essentially it's fine to be outside and meeting your friends, etc. And they find out this is not true. Maybe not because of the mistake of the government, but the virus is still lurking in dark corners or in a handshake. So that's one problem. Secondly, the currency shock in progress. I'm really sorry. I have done a video on that. You can find it at the bottom in Real Turkey channel, explaining the damage that the weakening of the Turkish currency can do to the economy. Essentially, higher inflation and higher financing costs for corporates, which are already not making any profits. As I was preparing for this broadcast, the dollar TL pair was trading at 7.06, which means the Turkish lira has depreciated something like 20% since the beginning of the year. Traditionally, such a level of depreciation would add 4 percentage points to inflation. Obviously, right now, there's not enough demand, but in a few months, this currency shock is going to hurt inflation. We will forever live with double-digit inflation. Also, there is really no sign that the government is taking any measures to stop depreciation of the currency. I said that at the very least, the central bank must raise interest rates to make Turkish lira more attractive to foreign investors as well as to Turkish savers. B, apply to IMF for a standby loan, which would increase central bank's reserves and instill confidence in both Turks and non-resident investors to stay in Turkish lira and Turkish lira assets, and thus mitigate depreciation pressures. This could get very, very bad. I think the title of my video was "Remember Pastor Bronson." Pastor Brunson was an American priest. We detained him, and Trump threatened sanctions. Turkish lira lost something like 25-30% within a month. If we are faced with this kind of a scenario, there would be a domino effect of bankruptcies in the corporate sector, and the Turkish economy would not be able to get back on its feet for at least a year or so. The third reason is that the state aid doesn't reach enough unemployed people. So far, official figures suggest that more than 4 million people are getting some kind of compensation, which is great. I mean, I am grateful to the Turkish government for even doing this much. But the compensation these people receive is no more than 50% of the minimum wage, perhaps even less. So they have less disposable income and less purchasing power. This is a demand shock which would continue until these people are employed again. Then there are segments of the population which the relief web is not reaching. Agricultural workers, 4 million Syrians, most of which are illegally employed. What happened to them? What happened to them? They were the main source of cheap labor for Turkey's labor-intensive industries. These people are not getting anything. As I might have said that in one of my earlier broadcasts, according to official statistics, by the way, roughly 30-35% of the Turkish workforce is not enrolled in the social security system. And these people only qualified for welfare payments, which are only 1/3 of the minimum wage, and not all of them qualified. Self-employed don't qualify. For instance, suppose YouTube demonetized me, and I'm not making it, not that I'm making all my money from YouTube, but suppose YouTube demonetized me and I'm not making any money. I cannot go to the government and ask for welfare, for monetary aid. So it is difficult to give numbers, but according to two studies made in Istanbul, roughly 20% of the population is not receiving anything, is unemployed or part-time unemployed and not receiving any government compensation. Now, why is this disastrous? Because this is how the economic dynamics works. The world is a demand-driven economy. There must be demand for things and services to be produced. If there is insufficient demand, mostly from consumers, then even if we open our factories to business, there will be no, production would be meaningless because nobody would be buying them. And that in turn turns into a vicious cycle. How? Well, factories have been shut down for a month and a half. Now they go back to business. They start producing goods and services, and they see there is very little demand for it. Their inventories are building up and their loans are coming due. So what do? They reduce production again and they start laying off workers. We go back to square one. Fewer employed people, less disposable income, less consumption. Repeat the algorithm. And I'm afraid we're in this situation. I'm afraid on top of the current unemployed, not fully compensated by the government, we're going to have another 800,000 to 1 million seasonal workers in the tourism industry, which, will receive something probably, but not, nowhere near what they would have made had they found employment, which would prolong the crises, the consumption crises, to the fourth quarter of the year. So far, I think I have, laid out a fairly feasible scenario that until the fourth quarter, economic recovery is not feasible. Not part of my presentation, but parenthetically, official EU sources say they are not going to be in a position to send tourists or buy things from us. So domestic consumption zero, fixed investment. Why would you if you are using only 60% of your capacity? Foreign sales down. Finally, in modern economies, you need credit, which is sort of the blood in the veins for the economy. And because of very low interest rates, deposits are not growing too fast. Secondly, even though the banking regulator has temporarily suspended all the regulations and rules about reporting bad loans or impaired loans, banks must make provisions for those. My rudimentary analysis from the first quarter financial statements of major banks suggest that bad loans are an average 7% of the loan portfolio as of end of March. So in April, they'll probably get worse. And impaired loans or loans which are not making interest payments on time are roughly 10% of the portfolio. So already before the corona epidemic showed its full force on Turkish economy, roughly 17% of the loan portfolio was not returning any money for the banks. That would probably rise to 125%, I'm sorry, to 25% or so. And banks would be very, very reluctant to make loans by the summertime. And without new loans, economic recovery is simply not possible. So essentially, this is the gist of my broadcast today. The world is debating whether there will be V-shaped recoveries, U-shaped recoveries, U-shaped recoveries, I'm sorry. I think we are going to have a U-shaped recovery. That is, obviously as the economy opens, some of the economic activity will come back, but Turkey will probably linger at a speed of 1 to 2% GDP growth until the end of 2021, while inflation fares in double digits. So CPI averaging anywhere between 10 to 12%. Okay, thank you very much for watching to Real Turkey channel. I would really appreciate if you share these with people who have some kind of interest in Turkey, whether for business or academic reasons. And I hope to see you again in our net broadcast. Atilla Yeşilada signing out from Istanbul.